Finally, time for our main event of the evening, Matt. At 135 pounds, we have the former World Series bantamweight champion Marlon Moraes taking on a really tough out in Cory Sandhagen. I say that although Cory Sandhagen was finished in his last fight early on against Aljamain Sterling, a guy who deserves a title shot. Dana,
let's be honest.
Mick, everybody, Sean, book that title fight for Aljamain Sterling. Come on, Petr Sterling 2020 or 2021. We want to see it, but if this fight delivers, who knows? And for Marlon Moraes, he had that fight against Henry Cejudo that went great until it didn't, and that was the issue. But this is a guy that had 7 5-round fights with World Series in a row. As I said, the former champion. He had 3 main event spots in a row with the UFC. I mean, that Utica mainer against New York's own, and I get it. I mean, Jimmy Rivera, maybe not from Utica, but wow, did he not impress in that one? Silenced the crowd of, I mean, it was like, what, 6,500, and by that point, it was like 3,000. So there weren't a lot of people there, but the people that were sweeping up the popcorn enjoyed it nonetheless, and I thought it was great. It was a good win for Marlon Moraes. You know, in that first round to round and a half, you're going to get prime Marlon Moraes, a guy that's a Muay Thai black belt or Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's dangerous everywhere, but primarily with his striking. And as everybody likes to say, every fight favors a striker when it starts, because every round starts on the feet. And that's the dumbest thing I might have said. But for Marlon Moraes, it's the best thing you can say, because opposite him, Cory Sandhagen, this guy, and Matt, we texted back and forth on the weekend. If there was an epitome of the word wonky, it's Cory Sandhagen. This guy's striking's weird. His jiu-jitsu's weird. Maybe his jiu-jitsu isn't to the same level belt-wise as Marlon Moraes, but oh boy, is it effective.
So Cory Sandhagen got submitted by Aljamain Sterling. There's no shame in that whatsoever. If you don't know how good of a grappler Aljamain Sterling is, I don't know what you're doing.
Get out of town.
Exactly, because Aljo, phenomenal volume, really good shot selection, and then once the fight goes to the ground, he can basically finish you. And I feel comfortable. He can finish you however he wants to, because he got a Suluev stretch over Cody Stamann, who's another top 10 guy, and that's one of the most rare submissions you can get in the UFC. That's how good Aljamain Sterling is. Now, I understand Marlon Moraes' belt is a higher level, like you were mentioning with Cory Sandhagen. Marlon's more... the second to Sunset fight's a really good example, because Marlon's submission game is normally, he's going to hit you with a big shot, you're going to go down, and then if he can't get the ground and pound off right away, he is good enough at jiu-jitsu that if he can find an arm, he'll go for it. If he can get your neck, he'll go for it. And that Sunset performance, the second one, was just so impressive, because it was a guy who, a lot of people thought Marlon won the first fight. A lot of people thought Sunset won their first fight. It was really, really close. And it was Marlon's first fight in the UFC. So you do have to take into account octagon jitters. Some people talk about a lot. And then, so he goes out there, has a really close fight with the Sun Sao. So you can't really tell much. You just know he's good because the Sun Sao at that time, I believe, was ranked 3rd in the world. Then he goes out there, fights to another split decision with John Dodson. So again, we don't really know where Marlon is. And then he knocks out Aljamain Sterling. And then he knocks out Jimmy Rivera. And then he basically knocks out and submits a Sun Sao. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, he's the champ. Like, I can't wait for him to fight TJ. Because you have a guy with this crazy explosiveness, this super fast twitch, can throw all these different Muay Thai techniques, has amazing head kicks. And then that Henry Cejudo fight happened, and I gotta be honest, I haven't dropped stock in a fighter faster than I did for Marlon in that fight, because, and Craig and I argued about this a little bit before the cameras turned on, there's one thing fighters I don't know if they never get rid of, and this might be harsh on Marlon Moraes, but you just gotta call it like you see it. He kind of gave up in that fight. He was doing so well, and it's kind of what happened with Mike Tyson. You're doing well, and then you kind of face that adversity, and instead of just being like, okay, this is what it is, let's push through it, Marlon kind of wilted under that, and you can just tell with his body language. At the start of the first round, second round, he's all puffed up, he's like kind of cocky walking out there, but when the fight starts to get hard, you can see it. When he goes back to his corner after that second round, he's huffing and puffing for air, and Mark Henry's giving him a pep talk of all pep talks, and Henry Cejudo, the guy who's been getting beat up for the last 10 minutes, is still... He's clear-headed, he's talking to his coaches, and he's just figuring out, okay, how can I make this fight harder? And I don't know if that's something that, you have to just say, listen, Henry Cejudo arguably is one of the greatest fighters who's ever fought in MMA. He beat Demetrius, he's beat just so many great fighters. He beat Marlon. That maybe it wasn't that Marlon wasn't good that night, it's just Cejudo is so great. And I do understand that, but that's something that in MMA, when you see a guy kind of wilt under that pressure, it's a taste you can never get out of your mouth. And Cory Sandhagen, I've seen him get dropped in almost every single, or at least rocked in most of his fights, and it tends to be from one of the first 3 or 4 punches. I mean, the Alcantara fight's a great example. He gets rocked immediately, ends up on the ground in one of the worst positions you'll ever see, like mounted with a triangle and an armbar. and he works his way out of that position. So I know with Cory Sandhagen, no matter what happens, he could get dropped with a head kick. He's going to keep on fighting it until he's completely out. I mean, here's a good example, and this is stupid because people think it's a description of toughness, but Cory Sandhagen didn't even tap when Aljamain Sterling choked him out. Like, he went to sleep. And that's hardcore. It just is. And Cory Sandhagen's skill set is a really interesting one to match up against Marlon, because Marlon is that tank. He's going to stand right there, march forward. He's going to throw really good leg kicks, really good power shots, and he is going to keep on marching forward until you give him a reason not to. And Cory Sandhagen, it'll be interesting because he can kind of play both games. If he wants to just stand there, kind of put pop in the end of his shots, his striking's similar to Kevin Holland, kind of, where he's a longer guy for the division, but he's still got good pop. And then if he wants to, he's got that weird sort of Dominic Cruz. It's not as herky-jerky, it's a little bit more fluid, but he does have that really good footwork too, that I do think could give Marlon some trouble in this fight.
And you see fighters like that have a lot of success. Another one that comes to mind, not the herky-jerkiness, but Neil Magny's another guy. He uses his length well, he can push a pace, he can bring the fight to the ground, he can use his jiu-jitsu. Maybe we don't see it as much as we see the striking, but a very complete martial artist that understands his distance management. You see a lot of longer fighters, especially in the higher weight classes, where they have a significant reach and height advantage, and they can't use it. They have to get into the pocket and trade, and they have an advantage that they just leave there. It leaves, it's standing on those steps going into the octagon, and it doesn't follow them in there. And for Marlon Moraes, it has to be weird because you lose to Cejudo in a fight that you were winning, and then just dropped off a cliff in the third round. So then you go in there and take on a legend. And I'm assuming it would be like if I fought George St. Pierre. Wow, I have so much pride for this guy.
Go well.
I grew up watching this guy beat some of the best in the world. I'm Canadian, he's Canadian. Holy smokes, let's share Molson after this one. But ultimately, I have to fight him. Marlon Moraes is going in there. You're fighting Jose Aldo, a legend of the sport. You can argue with me till the cows come home. I think Holloway's great, but to me, Jose Aldo, the greatest featherweight of all time. Now, Joe Rogan might not agree with me, but maybe you at home agree, disagree. Jose Aldo's great. Drops down to 35. Moraes beats him. You can make an argument either way. I thought that Moraes won that fight.
It was as close to a draw as you can get. Let's be honest. They fought pretty much par.
That's fair. It has to be absolutely demoralizing. If you beat a guy, he comes in off of 2 losses, albeit to Volkanovski and Moraes, and gets a title shot.
Now, I'm going to throw even more salt in the wound of Marlon Moraes. You know who we were supposed to fight before COVID broke out? Piotr Jan in Kazakhstan. That was supposed to be a main event, and in all honesty, the winner of that is fighting for a title, or the winner of that is champ by now. So he'd not only got the title fight taken away from him, the #1 contendership taken away from him, now he has to just fight Cory Sandhagen, and there's no promise of anything. Because if you beat Cory Sandhagen, yes, it's impressive, but you're beating a guy who another top contender has already finished in about the most impressive way possible. I don't think Marlon can go out there and knock out Cory Sandhagen, or even submit Cory Sandhagen faster than Aljamain did. And oh wow, Matt, you don't think Marlon can finish Cory Sandhagen in a minute? No, I don't. I think this is going to be a really competitive fight because both guys' strengths play into the other guy's weakness.
So it should be an interesting fight. Now, I put this one out there in the Fight Night Picks community tab section, so make sure you check that out. But I said, let's get into it. Main event banger at bantamweight. Who's getting the win? Out of 489 votes so far, this was 9 hours ago, 62% going with Moraes. But the commenters, and I see you out there, you're going with Cory Sandhagen. So let's look over at Tapology, compare and contrast. It's about the same percentages. It was 765 votes, 68% going Moraes, 62% predicting a knockout. So then we look at the odds. Marlon Moraes is an underdog in this fight. Open to minus 135. The money came in quick on Sandhagen. So Moraes right now plus 115. It's moved around a little bit. It's coming down on Moraes again. For Sandhagen, opens plus 115. Now he's a minus 140. Now let's focus on Cory Sandhagen. We've talked a lot about Marlon Moraes. We're already 9 minutes into this video. Cory Sandhagen, like you had said, in that fight against Alcantara, and I know recently he just got released by the UFC because he's really old. He's not young for bantamweight. Yeah. And not everybody can be like a Sun Tzu. All right, I get it. He got knocked out by Garbrandt in his last fight. But he defied the laws of age and time for a long time at the top of that bantamweight division. Not everybody can be a Sun Tzu or a really tough out Massaranduba. Francisco Trinaldo, 55. It's just the truth. And for Sandhagen, he was in a compromising spot right off the jump, got out of it. He's faced adversity. He's faced top competition. And apart from that fight against Aljamain Sterling, where I mean, before that fight, Sterling had an opportunity at a title shot. After beating Sandhagen, I really think Sterling deserves a title shot. Dana White's basically just cucking this entire division by putting Jose Aldo into a title fight and continuing on as they have. But I think that this sets up a great fight. You've got Moraes, who's had so much experience at the 5-round level. Sandhagen hasn't, but trains at a great gym where I think it prepares you perfectly for this opportunity. You've got Trevor Whitman and the gang in your corner. You're training at Elevation with Team Elevation, and Neil Magny was a name that I brought up earlier. And hey, I know it gets mixed up every now and again, but the team at Factory X and then the separate, obviously, team at Elevation, you have a huge advantage training up there in the mountains in Colorado. I mean, look at what it did for the career of Brendan Schaub. It worked out all right. He knocked out Mirko friggin' Krokop. So, in this one, maybe the level of pedigree of the belt of Cory Sandhagen isn't up to par with Marlon Moraes, but the guy has had a slow burn effect in some of his fights. In the Sterling fight, it was quick. We've gone over the odds, the fact that Sandhagen's the favorite now, but the fan vote is with Moraes. How do you see this one down the middle? Because there's a distinct path for both guys. Moraes, fast twitch starter, probably going to need to get it done early, but he has the experience in his back pocket. Sandhagen, boy, this guy is slippery. As we said, he's wonky.
So this is an interesting fight because it's not often you can say, I think Marlon can knock out Cory Sandhagen. I think Cory Sandhagen can knock out Marlon Moraes. Can Marlon Moraes submit Cory Sandhagen? Yeah, he can. Can Cory Sandhagen do the same to Marlon? Of course he can. Can both guys beat each other by decision? Probably. So they match up so well, and this really is just perfect matchmaking on the UFC. We can harp on them for the bantamweight division, kind of the weird flux that's in right now, but bantamweight is as exciting as any division right now, and I would argue that bantamweight, if you look at the top 10, it's basically just a bunch of guys you can match up, and there's a fight of the night going to happen. Because you have those names like Pedro Munoz, you've got Frankie Edgar's now in the mix, you've got Marlon, Cory, Sterling, Jan. Like, bantamweight's as good as any division in the UFC. I hate to say that if this fight ends in the first 2 rounds, it's probably going to be because Marlon won, and if it ends in the last 3, it's because of Cory Sandhagen. But I do see it kind of that cut and dry. Now, of course, it's the vice versa effect too, because these guys do match up so well. Interesting to note, Cory Sandhagen's so much bigger, just frame-wise. He is 5'11". He's basically just built like me, which is interesting, I guess. Because when you're that really tall, lanky guy using the footwork, I think it's worked out for Cory in a lot of his fights. But again, I keep on going back to the Marlon kind of giving up against Cejudo. I have to go back to Cory Sandhagen getting stunned in each and every one of his fights. You can get stunned by a guy like Yuri Alcantara. You can get stunned by a guy like John Lineker. I don't know if you can eat a shot by Marlon and just get stunned. I think you go down and stay down from those. It's unfortunate to say because I do really think that Cory Sandhagen has this super bright future. I know he's a little bit older for a lot of prospects because it seems like every time we talk about Cory Sandhagen, it's that, oh, he's that new up-and-comer, but he is 28 years old. Like, Robert Whittaker won the title when he was 26. Jan won the title when he was 27. So, like, he's a little bit older than, maybe the UFC would like you to think that he is, but still, hasn't taken a ton of damage, still young in his MMA career at least. I do think the future's bright for Cory Sandhagen. I think there's plenty of opportunity for him to win this fight. I just think the firepower that Marlon brings to most fights, especially at the bantamweight division, unless he is fighting a Cejudo who can just mix it up so much, unless he's fighting a Jan, will just be interesting because it's like 2 guys with 15 out of 10 for power, and we'll just see what happens. But I think Marlon stylistically is just a really hard matchup for Sandhagen. I think the leg kicks are going to be a big problem. Here's the thing, and this is kind of the caveat. If Cory Sandhagen can do 2 things, I think he can win this fight. If he can check leg kicks, which is a massive if, and then my other kind of side note, if he can cut Marlon early on in this fight, I think he can get at the confidence of him. It's kind of that Tyron Woodley aspect where Bisping talks about a lot on the broadcast. When Gilbert Burns first dropped Tyron Woodley, Michael Bisping just blew it out. It was like, oh, that's the worst thing that could ever happen. Because, like, once you get to these guys' confidence, it's really hard for them to build it back up unless they can land that big shot, see you hurt, and then they kind of get that rush back. I think if Marlon can just stay to his game plan, fight like he did in the Aldo fight, where he's a little bit more conserved, but when he really does have to sit down on his shots, he can always have that in his back pocket. So, although my heart might be siding with Cory Sandhagen, my prediction is going to be Marlon Moraes. I just think the power is going to be too much for Cory in this one.
And I'm going to go with Moraes as well, and here's why. You can look at all the numbers that you want. Both guys have enough splits in the UFC that the percentages matter, but Marlon Moraes, slightly negative striking differential by decimal points. For Cory Sandhagen, 6.95 significant strikes landed per minute to 4.08 taken. So that's a good differential. The percentages for accuracy higher for Sandhagen. It's that weirdness, that wonkiness, but the volume definitely lies with Marlon Moraes. It's something you see a lot more. Like you said, the leg kicks, the kicks in general. This is a guy that can mix it up. He can switch stances. He can go to the legs a couple of times, and then he can switch stances and go high kick to the head. He can knock you out. He can do a lot of things where Cory Sandhagen, he's going to draw you in. I mean, you always have to worry about the takedown and the submissions, and he can set things up on the feet. And it's very rare for somebody to be that good at jiu-jitsu and MMA. We always used to talk about it with TJ Dillashaw. Is he the best pure wrestler? Is he the best guy with the best collegiate career? No, I mean, Ben Askren's one of the best guys, pure wrestling-wise, to bring it into MMA. But TJ Dillashaw, at a time, was probably the best wrestler in MMA, or the best MMA wrestler, and you saw it in a lot of his fights.
I don't know if I'll agree with that right away, but...
He evolved from collegiate wrestler to the poster child for Bang Muay Thai. And for Marlon Moraes, again, you've got the jiu-jitsu in the back pocket. You've got the black belt in Muay Thai. For Sandhagen, you might not have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. You teach it. But you have the ability to set things up on the feet because people are going to be worried about the fact that you're such a good grappler. It's one of those fights that makes me just want to, again, I say this a lot, but you sit back with the pop and the popcorn, you enjoy it. But I'm picking Marlon Moraes in this fight. I think he has the opportunity to, again, stun early, hop on. Yes, Sandhagen could grab a leg. He could do something crazy. He could do that too. But I do think that Marlon Moraes has a good shot.
This has Fight of the Night written all over it, though. That's one of my guarantees. I'm not doing locks anymore because they're all wrong. But my locks for awards, this is going to be either Performance of the Night or Fight of the Night. I don't see how this can't be an exciting fight. Both guys move forward. Both guys are just amazing everywhere. And it's not like, we say this a lot, like, oh, they're well-rounded. But when you say that, we mean like they're like a 6 out of 10 at everything. These guys are both like 8 out of 10s. Like this is as high level as MMA can get. I'm extremely excited for this main event, but I am siding with Magic Marlon Moraes.
Matt, we are really looking forward to it. Both of us going with Marlon Moraes. And if you missed the rest of predictions, make sure you check out the playlist. Or if you're early in the week, the full card prediction video. And we've been toying with that. It seems to be working and people seem to be liking it. So we're going to keep doing that. You're going to see this out. This is coming out Tuesday night. We record Monday night. You're going to see the picks out individually later on in the week. And then on Saturday, we get an opportunity to recap with question mark kicks. A lot of you have been tuning into it. It was amazing this past weekend for Home Aldana, which was maybe not the best card on paper, but a lot of people tuned in. We had a lot of fun with that. We wore the denim on denim. You got to check that out on Instagram at Fight Night Picks. Lots of great fights on this card. Lots of sleepers that you shouldn't miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.